Hey everybody, John Wagon here with DevCentral, and we're coming to you with another Lightboard lesson video today. And today we're going to talk about the ASM, our Application Security Manager, and some exceptions that you can configure on the ASM. And so the idea is this, that you've got clients out there that are trying to access your web application, and you've got that ASM sitting in front of your web application, and it's protecting everything via the policy that you built. But there are, just like anything, there's always an exception to the rule. There's always maybe a guy out there, an IP address, a file type, or something that you want to let through that policy. So today we're going to talk about a couple of the different aspects of how to make that work. So just from an overview perspective, again, you've got a client out there coming into your big IP, and the big IP is in front of your, these are your apps over here, your web apps on the back end that you're protecting. And so here you have your ASM provisioned. And like we've talked about in other Lightboard lesson videos, the way that you configure this ASM is via a policy. And so you create a policy, and there's a lot of different ways to create a policy. You can do it manually, you can do it automatically, you can bring in like a third-party scanner source, pull it in that way. There's all different kinds of ways to build this policy, but nonetheless, you're going to build the policy, and that policy is going to protect an application. And so whenever you build the policy, there are things like parameters that you're going to set. And so I'm going to just write some of these out. There are file types that you're going to establish. There are URLs that you want to protect, things like that. And so it stands to reason that your application that you want to protect has certain parameters that it uses, when it was built or when it is built. There are file types that it's going to need to use. There are URLs that are going to be established with the application. And so again, whenever you build this policy, you set all those things, the parameters that you want to allow through, the file types that are used in your application. And again, the idea is, let's say the file type, like maybe .exe, is not ever really used in your application, and so you can take that file type and say, hey, do not let that file type through this ASM. So if anyone tries to come in with that file type, then you're going to block it. Or you can set whatever file type you want. Conversely, you can say, hey, these are the only file types that are used by my application, so anything other than that, you need to block it. So as you establish the policy, you set all the parameters, you set all the file types, you set all the URLs, everything that your application uses. Now you have a user out there, maybe you have some other client out there that needs to access your application, but it doesn't fall in the normal bounds of what you have set up. So you need to set up some exceptions to that. And so there's a couple different ways to do that, in a couple of different areas that I was going to look at today that you need to be familiar with and you need to maybe kind of focus on. And so I'm gonna point us to in the user interface, in the GUI when you're in the ASM. You can go to blocking, navigate over to blocking, and then go over to settings. And blocking settings is going to have a whole host of different things. There's going to be maybe some different violation types. I'm going to put violation types, and these could include things like RFC violations, maybe some different access violations that are going to be listed there that say things like, that was an illegal file type, or maybe an illegal HTTP response code, for example. Or one that we actually used to deal with here on DevCentral and still do, maybe some of you could relate to this. There's one called the illegal meta character in a URL or in a parameter name. And so just a little anecdotal story here about DevCentral. Whenever you log into DevCentral, you can type in your username and your password, and some people use their email address as their username, which is fine. And so some email addresses have various little hyphens or slashes or dots or whatever, in it. And so the ASM sometimes doesn't like that, because by default it's gonna say no to some of those meta characters. And so one of the parameter types on DevCentral is that email, that user input email field. And so that parameter said, hey, these meta characters are not allowed. So we would have to go in there and say, hey, if you've got an email address, say with a little hyphen in it, we're going to need to go in there, and for that specific parameter, we're going to allow that specific meta character for that parameter, and then you can use that. So now when you log in and you use your email address, it's got the little dash in it, then you're good to go. So anyway, but where you set a lot of that is in the blocking settings. You go to these violation types, and it's got all of them listed, and so you can either block on those, or just alarm on those, or just log those things. And so anyway, so you can set all that stuff here under the blocking settings area of the ASM. So that's a critical place to go look to set some of these exceptions. The other place that I was going to say is in the event logs, and I'll write it maybe right up here. When you go into your event logs, let's say that your ASM has done a great job of blocking a user request just like what you wanted it to do, and you're going to go into the event logs and then go to that, and then I'll just say right here, you go to application, and then it's going to be requests. So you go into requests here, and so when you go to event logs, application, request, it's going to show you everything that has blocked or that's been logged specifically. And so when you go and you look at the things that have been blocked, there may be, I'll go back to my little email meta character example. There may be a block that says, illegal meta character in parameter type, and I'll just put param, illegal meta character in that parameter. And so from this screen, from the event logs, application requests, so you look at all these different blocks, you can actually look at the details of this. It'll show you exactly why it blocked. And then you can go in, actually in that screen, it's kind of a cool thing. You can go, while you're in that area of the ASM screen, you can actually set an exception right there. And so then, if I wanted this illegal meta character, dash, let's say, in the email input field parameter, then I can set that right there. It doesn't mean that meta character is going to be allowed on all the other parameters or other URLs or that kind of thing, but it will just specifically be for that parameter. So that you can get pretty granular with this. I will say as well that some of these blocking settings are a global, it's like a global setting, so you cannot get granular with specific parameters or URLs or file types on every single one of these, but a lot of them you can. And I'm not going to sit here and go through every single one of them now, but I would just say get out there, play around with it, but there are a lot that you can get very granular with and say, hey, allow this specific thing on this specific parameter or this specific file type, and you can set those exceptions as needed. So it's a nice thing to be able to do once you set up your overall policy. We all know that there's going to be exceptions to those rules, and so you're going to need to allow some of these IP addresses or file types or various things through that are very valid, valid users or valid requests. So anyway, so get out there, set up your policy, and then as you need to really kind of tweak that thing to make it do exactly what you want it to do. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces with these policies, but you can do a lot of really powerful stuff. So thanks for watching today. Hope you picked up a couple things about the ASM and the exceptions that you can have to that. And we'll see you guys out there in the community.